See all the old familiar. Good to see all the old familiar faces back again, and a few new ones. So as Dima mentioned, I just crossed the pond for a little bit. So I'm going back to it on Sunday. But right now I'm sitting right next to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, which is kind of surreal. Probably talking about the desert in Israel, whereas when you're in Manhattan, there's a whole almost like an assault to one's senses. So much noise and so many people and so much stuff. We're going to go totally to the opposite end of the spectrum. We're going to go to the desert. So normally when you think of desert, you think of the word deserted or empty or quiet. But yet in Hebrew, it's a very different word. In Hebrew, the word's midbar, the word for desert, which comes from the word to speak. And if you think about it, the seminal event of the Jewish people happened in the desert, which of course is the Aseret Dibrot, what's known in English as the Ten Commandments, even though of course there was a lot more than 10 of them. That's a whole different lecture. So basically you have, we were spoken to in the desert. And the question is like, why? Why did the children of Israel not get the Torah given to them in Egypt so they could prepare when they got to Israel? Why was it necessary to wander for 3 months in the desert before they got the Ten Commandments? And there are many different theories and ideas. And the one that I like the most, again, if we weren't speaking with hundreds of people on Zoom, I would ask all you guys your theories. But then you'd have like 2 Jews and 3 opinions who would be here all day just answering one question. So against my better judgment as an educator, I'm more into the monologue than dialogue mode. But we are happy, though, to get your questions in the chat. So basically, the thing I like the best is you needed the 3 months in the desert so they could connect with themselves. The desert does speak to you. In Hebrew, the word midbar, the root is dalet bet resh, which is to speak. And when you're in the desert and away from all the noise of civilization, I say, speaking to you from New York the second, that you actually get connected with yourself. Sometimes you have to disconnect to connect. A few years ago, I climbed Kilimanjaro, and I was explaining to my kids that for a week, I'm not going to have any drinking water or food. We have to take it all with us. So they're listening and whatever. They weren't really concerned. And I said, by the way, I'm also going to have no Wi-Fi for a week. They're like, no Wi-Fi for a week? How are you going to survive? Like, never mind, no water, no food. And it was glorious. For those that week in Tanzania, I could connect to myself, to the people I was with, to the stars, to the nature. And sometimes when you get away from it all, it actually helps you realize exactly who you are and what you are. And that, of course, is what happened many times in the desert. We find prophets such as Elijah going out to the desert to the expressions he was to clean out his head and to focus. We find King David going to the desert before he was the king. And also in the New Testament as well, we have JC, otherwise known as Yehoshua ben Yosef, also going out to the desert as well to connect with his cousin, Yochanan the mikveh keeper, otherwise known as John the Baptist. So basically, it says it's always a place where we go for the peace and the quiet. And there are people on this talk who have been many times to Israel. And when you go to Israel, really you go to the same old places all the time. You go to Jerusalem, you go to Tel Aviv. If you're going to go to the desert, you're probably going to go to Masada, which is Israel's most popular site. And basically, the desert, just to go and hang out in the desert, is not usually on people's itineraries. What we're going to do today is we're going to have a double sort of itinerary. We're watching a 25-minute presentation I made with my friend Shmuel, who's also a tour guide. I'm the one who speaks the Queen's English, and he speaks with a colonial South African accent. You'll spot him, he's a blonde one. So the two of us went out to the desert, and we decided to make use of the Corona times and go to places we don't normally go to. Because normally when you're a tour guide, like the group wants a certain itinerary, they want to go, quote unquote, where everyone else goes. So they wanted to go, most groups want to go to the Jewish quarter, to Jerusalem, to Sfat, to all the standard places. But now we had this very quiet time in Israel. We could go and explore off the beaten track and share what we find with you. So one more thing about the desert, for me, just personally, everyone's got their own favorite place in Israel. Whenever I have a group, a birthright group, or any other group that's more than a few days, I always ask them at the end, what was your favorite place in Israel? And of course, different people affects people differently. Some people love the hustle and bustle of Tel Aviv. It's like Miami Beach with Hebrew signs. They feel comfortable there. Some people like the spirituality of Jerusalem. For some people, it's too overwhelming. Some people like the green tranquility of the Golan and all the springs and the beautiful hikes. And some people, like myself, like the tranquility of the desert, the peace and the quiet. Quite often when I have city or urban groups, and I give them a few hours to walk in the desert in silence and do stargazing, it stuns them. So they've never heard what Simon and Garfunkel referred to as the sound of silence, like the vastness of it. And of course, going back to children of Israel, it makes you feel small and humble. It's by human nature, by nature is we are the center of the world and the universe revolves around us. But when you go into the desert, you feel small and you feel humble and you feel that you're a cog in a vast eternal machine. And it teaches one the lesson of humility. So when asked why the children of Israel went to the desert for 3 months, A, to teach humility, B, to learn to work together, and C, of course, to learn that not everything comes from me, I. When you're out in the desert, you need water and food to survive. And they were given the miraculous manna and water from various sources. And they realized maybe there's a force bigger than them, bigger than us in this universe. So that's a spiritual aspect of the desert. But from a practical aspect, what we're going to see today also has a lot of strategic importance. Where we're going to go to today, and you'll see in the middle of the film when I whip out my map, we're going to a place that many people don't go to, even though, in fact, I doubt, I'd be very impressed if anyone has been there. Before there was Herod, of course, our good friend Herod, who we've spoken about before, there was the Maccabees, the ones from the Hanukkah story. And once they kicked out the Seleucid or the Hellenized Greeks who were there at the time, they themselves for 100 years had their own dynasty of Jews actually ruling the land of Israel in the Second Temple period. So historically, we're talking about from about 164 BCE all the way through to 63 BCE, when Pompey and the Romans came roaming in. And during that century, what the Maccabees did, and we're going to explore one today virtually, even though I went and did all the groundwork for you, is we're going to see that they built a whole series of desert fortresses. And they built them for 2 reasons. One is because strategically they were important, because they were on the border with the Parthian Empire, which is today known as the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. And they were building these fortresses along the desert, along the border, because it's to stop invasion. And B, they were good getaway fortresses. In case there was trouble in Jerusalem, this is only about a 40-minute ride today by car, or maybe a couple of hours by speedy horse back then to get to these fortresses. So because they were royalty, they had certain things that royalty needed, such as bathhouses, mosaic floors, water systems, etc., etc. So they served a twofold purpose, both strategic and also as getaway places. And later on, when the Romans came in, they appointed their puppet king, your good friend of mine, Herod, and he basically got these fortresses and upgraded them. The most famous we talked about a few weeks ago is the Masada itself, originally built by the Hasmoneans, but later upgraded by Herod. So there's many too you might have heard of, a Herodian and Masada. There are also many others dotted along the Judean desert, such as we'll be visiting today, Hyrcanus, and Pathos, and also an Alexandrium. So basically the 6 on the what's today the Israel side, and one on the other side, the Jordanian side, called Macareus. So without further ado, we're going to plunge into the desert. The first quarter of an hour of the film, you have my friend Shmuel and myself, both was licensed tour guides. We're seeing one thing right now, and that's tourists. And we're basically running through the desert, absorbing the atmosphere of the desert, the Judean desert, which is a shadow desert. It's not the Negev desert, which is below the Beersheba desert line. And seeing the various flora and fauna there, but also as we get closer to this fortress, we start picking up on man-made signs such as water systems, water reservoirs, all the things that you needed to have to survive in the desert 2,000 years ago. And middle, we're going to pause and take any questions, and then we're going to carry on to the actual exploration of this desert fortress itself. Again, it's called Hyrcanus. It was built by the Maccabees around the 1st century BCE, upgraded by Herod in the 1st century, just before the year dot, and basically abandoned for the last 2,000 years. It's actually an archaeological wonderland. It's never actually been fully excavated, as we're about to see. So first of all, to paraphrase Billy Joel, he talked about the New York state of mind where I am right now, which is very noisy and loud. We're going to go now into the desert state of mind, and we're going to see why the desert is so special, spiritually and also strategically and historically, what we can find in the Judean deserts in Israel. So without further ado, let's ask Dima to start the presentation. And again, if you have any disconnection or connection issues, you can find it on the YouTube as well. So let's start. Sound.
It's not that he had a persecution complex, he just thought that everybody
Dima,
was
אתה יכול
out
להתחיל מההתחלה?
whole string of fortresses in the desert.
Good morning, Shmuel Chantal, the running tour guide, together with Dr. Book. You find yourselves with us in the middle of the wilderness, and we're carrying on with the theme of Herod.
Yalla, let's go. Herod, it's not that he had a persecution complex, he just thought that everybody was out to get him and built a whole string of fortresses in the desert. Two are very famous, Herodian and Masada, the others less so. Today, we are trying to find some of the lesser known Herodian fortresses.
Where we're headed?
Welcome to the desert zone. We are looking for Hyrcanus. Hyrcanus, or can we? We'll soon find out.
Okay, and we're on our way in search of Hyrcanus. Somewhere here, amongst these hills, we have to find it. There's quite a lot of rolling hills and lots of humps along the route, but you know you're in Israel when how's the scene?
Oh, they've definitely got the hump.
Let's see if this one's faster than us. Let's go.
Yo!
Yalla. Huh. They're pretty quick. Boy, sounds like indigestion.
Yo!
Whoa, that's what you call camel dust.
Sam's choking the camel dust. There he is.
Wow, what a scene. This is like a camel crossing migration in the desert. Wow, welcome to the Holy Land. Okay, we're getting somewhere. We're now dropping into Nachal Schacha. And this Nachal, a stream, which is a dry stream, is mentioned in the book of Joshua, connecting us with the location where we are. And today it's dry, but if you come back here in the winter months, from about October through to February, there can be flash floods pouring down these hills, coming from Jerusalem, Jerusalem, going down towards the East Sea, the Dead Sea, and gorgeous terrain. Oh, whoa! Check out this! Wow. I wonder what these could be. Any ideas, Dr. Book?
Well, I don't bore you, but these are borot. Borot mayim. These are water holes. One of the big things in the desert, if you're going to live here, is how to survive without water. And as my earnest colleague said, we have flash floods here. 3 days of flash flooding filled up 40,000 cubic liters on Masada, 14 cisterns, and we're about to look for Herod's mini fortress. This is already a sign that there's human habitation close by, because these two massive water holes are designed for capturing the water in the flash floods. You'll notice it's right off the stream itself. The torrent of water will come in. If you're going to waste, there'll be a small dam diverting the water into these systems. Definitely signs of 2,000-year-old hydraulic engineering here.
Fascinating, Dr. Book. And would you agree with me that this was most probably covered over, and over time it has collapsed? So in other words, the minute I step into this cavity, above me would be the roof of the cistern.
Absolutely, and that's the giveaway over there.
Yeah, have a look here. You can see parts of the walls still remaining, which of course was plastered. Here's the ancient plaster. Without this, limestone, which is porous, would just drink the water. So you need the plaster. But wow, antiquity is just everywhere. Let's have a closer look here. It's lovely and cool as you enter. Clear remains of human activity dating back to the period of Hyrcanus, hence the name Hyrcania. What years would we be talking?
Well, the Maccabees ruled from 163 BCE till 63 BC, when the Roman general Pompey took over the empire. And then the Roman Empire was from 63 BCE all the way until its collapse after it became the Byzantine Empire in the 7th century. So these systems will probably date somewhere between the 1st century BCE and the 1st century CE. Somewhere in that 200-year period, about 2,000 years ago, these systems were built in the desert.
Check you on the hill. Okay, we're ascending. Check how steep this is.
Fabulous. Just see in a bit.
It's particularly hard to put this into words, but seeing so many different types of paths converging here. If you look on the other side of the valley, you can see a man's path steep descent down into Nahal. And if you look at these paths behind me, you can see ancient shepherd's paths. Both shepherd's paths crisscross this landscape. It's actually really painful.
I'll have a breakfast back when I get in. You better get in that kitchen and get it there.
The three thick parts of the pot of the shard, are the top, the rim, the base, and a handle. So these are the thick parts, and these are what are usually preserved. So this is a 2,000-year-old pot.
Get a hold of that. Get a handle of that.
George Friedrich Handel.
That's it. So that's exactly what I was trying to say to you. You know, it's layers of history. You can feel the generations of man and civilization that have been connected to these hills. But what's beautiful about it is you're seeing it in its authentic, naked, kind of original scene. It's always been like this. And this is what it's about. Come and experience the land. When you walk these hills, you're walking generations of history, which is just so thick and so tangible that it leaves you speechless. That's pretty much it. So let me keep quiet and just enjoy this last little climb before we crest the hill of history from the period of the Maccabees, from the period of Herod, from the period of the Bible.
Oh. It's mute.
Here it is. One more path. We thought we were at the top. Not yet. Stay tuned. Dr. Book.
Wonderful,
It's
right?
coming up. Here she is in all her glory. Wow. So what are your impressions?
For once, my friend, I'm speechless. In the words of the two famous Jewish songwriters, Shimon and Garfunkel, let us enjoy the sound of silence.
Sounds of silence. Do 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 do. Do do do. Do 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 do. Do do of silence. Well, we've been here appreciating the silence. Just want to point out modern water capture systems in the desert. If you look down here in the middle of the valley, that probably is a JNF catchment dam where they catch all of the runoff water that comes from the mountains of Judea. Oh, and look behind me. I haven't seen that yet. You can actually see the outskirts of Jerusalem. You can see the villages on the hill. That's probably right next to Abu Dis, ancient Bethany, where Lazarus was risen from the dead. And close to that, you'll have the mountains of the Mount Olives. But talking about the water catchment systems, you saw the cisterns from 2,000 years ago. Here we have modern cisterns capturing this water and using it for agriculture. But I think it's time for a drink. Do you have any water on you? Fine, let's drink some of this ice cold water. Location, location, location. It's the last conical hill on the edge. Ooh, there's a fox, a red desert fox.
Yeah, you're right.
See it running down?
Uh-huh.
There it goes. Wow.
Amazing, well spotted.
Thank you. Anyway, so that hill you can see is strategically located on the edge of this ridge, which overlooks a wide plateau. And then there's a secondary ridge where there's the sharp drop going down towards the Dead Sea. And I'm not sure if you guys can see on the horizon, you can make out the mountains of Moab, which is today in the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan. And those hills are higher than where we are. But location, right? Location, location, location.
And back in Herod's day, let's not forget, those mountains of the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan, which were part of the British mandate to Palestine, were once where the Roman Empire entered. That was where the border of the Parthian Empire and the Roman Empire was. The Parthians were the Romans' enemy to the east. This location we're about to enter is also a strategic border fortress protecting the eastern half of the Roman Empire.
Well, makes sense to me. The land comes alive, reading the historical texts. Check this out. No drone required, but here we have drone-like footage of a herd of camels. Oh, a herd? No, it's a caravan.
Get the flock out of here.
Check how this landscape changes. All these colored rocks, magnificent geological formations. And the color of these stones, the reds, the blacks, the yellows, the pinks. And we've reached it. Wow. What is this?
2,000 years ago, this is the remains of a water system, hydraulic system that brought water into the soil over there. Look how well it's preserved.
Untouched, unexcavated dam walls that could have been housing the water. Damned if you do, damned if you don't, damned if we know.
Meanwhile, did you hear the story about the 3 wells?
No?
Well, well, well.
This is incredible. Let's see all the history here. how the path winds up here. This is like the serpentine path at Masada. Check it out. Come, Mr. Book. Up we go. Sorry, Dr. Book. Forgive me, I've sinned. It's clear as daylight. And boy, is it daylight. It's now about 34 degrees. But if you look behind me, now I'm convinced it's unquestionably some sort of a water cavity. Looks like it was divided into sections, into different pools, where the aqueduct would catch the water, force them into these cavities, and lo and behold, we had ice cold water in part of the hill.
Wow, unexcavated virgin territory.
Unexcavated glory.
I just walked up here and found remains already of a Roman period roofing tile and some terrasse from mosaic floor. Let's go and see where these puzzles fit in.
As we dive in to where we are on the land, so pointing in this direction, we are finding ourselves midway between Jerusalem and the Dead Sea. Somewhere along this valley, you can see the road going via Jericho down towards the northern part of the Dead Sea. So we find ourselves somewhere here in between. And to plug you into the time period, here we have the timeline. Hold that up for a second. And we are going to be dealing with a period from the Hellenistic period, Hasmonean period, Roman period. So we're talking about a 300-year stretch of history?
More or less.
More or less. But probably focusing more on the Hasmonean and Roman period. And Herod comes into the picture right here, 37 to 4 BCE. That was the end of his life in this physical world. But let's plug into where we are. What can we see here, Tuvia, and what do we know about the site? Why is it an unexcavated site? I mean, I really see the potential of this place. It's just remarkable what still can be achieved in terms of studying and understanding the site.
Well, there's so much archaeological sites in Israel that there's simply not the budget to excavate everywhere. It's incredibly difficult to get to, as we see by our run here. And then really that's the same remoteness is what preserved the site as well, from grave robbers, from antiquities thieves. So almost 2,000 years since it was destroyed in a massive earthquake in the 7th century, more or less in situ. Even if you look down to our feet over here, you see these mosaic floors in a terrace made 2,000 years ago. What's the giveaway that it's a bit of a luxury palace is in addition to the white tiles, you also have red tiles.
Here's some black tiles. Where are the red tiles?
Coloured mosaic patterns. And of course, the big question on top of our hill.
Tuvia, back to you. We will have a little break now, as you asked. Thank you.
Okay, now we finally arrived to the fortress. We went through that very epic desert landscape. I was reading some of the serious comments, and some people mentioned that they've never seen this part of Israel before. Yet, believe it or not, I'm literally 20 minutes from Mount Scopus. That's how close it is to Jerusalem. If you drive down the desert road towards the Dead Sea from Jerusalem, there's a turning to the right way before you get to the Dead Sea where it says Nebi Musa, which is the Arabic word for Navi Moshe, like Moshe the prophet. And you just make a right turn from the Dead Sea Road, drive in for 10 minutes, and you get to where those camels were. That's how close it is to Jerusalem. And it's amazing. I've never yet, actually, in all my 30 years of tour guiding, I've only ever been with one group to where I am right now with you on this video. So it's just a question of knowing the right people who can take you to these places and having a convenient 4x4 vehicle to take you there. But it's just, Israel is a teeny country, as you probably know. It's the size of Wales, right? or where I grew up in South Africa, it's the size of the Kruger National Park. It's teeny, and yet it contains such diversity that even people who've been multiple times to Israel think, been there, seen there, done it, bought the T-shirt. They haven't, because it's just out. It's just mind-numbing how much there still is left to see. Shmuel and myself are both seasoned tour guides. I've been doing for 3 decades, and I'm constantly finding new places. Who would have thought that literally 25 minutes away from Jerusalem, you have this untouched, serene desert fortress with the mosaic tiles still on the floor, the way they were laid 2 millennia ago. It's just a mind-numbing. Also, how they managed to survive, to see the ancient systems, to see on the one hand the inhospitality of the desert, on the other hand the beauty of the desert that attracted them there. So someone mentioned they've been to Nebu Musa. There's most definitely not a monastery there. There's actually a Muslim holy shrine. It used to be a very important holy shrine for the Muslims who believed that Moshe was actually buried there, even though the Jewish Bible deliberately does not give a place of burial or a site so he won't become made an icon out of. But there is a Muslim shrine there. But you keep on driving past the Muslim shrine, and literally 10 minutes later, you'll see this path that we ran on all the way up to the fortress. If anyone knows anything about the Israel paths, they all have different colors, the nature trails. But there's one particular nature trail that has 3 colors, orange, white, and blue. And that is the Israel path that goes from Eilat all the way up to the Golan Heights. And part of it snakes through the Judean desert. Now, someone I could see afterwards asked me, where's the desert? So the definition of desert is anything below 2 inches, to use your language, of water a year, or 5 centimeters of water a year, which in Israel is from Beersheba below, what we call the Negev desert. Negev is the classical word for south. And yet this desert, the Judean desert, as you probably know, is above Beersheba. What makes it to a desert is what's known as a shadow desert. It's not unique to Israel. They also have them in the United States and other countries as well in Asia, where basically the water coming up from the Mediterranean, if there's a sea level, comes up to the hills of Jerusalem. The clouds, they evaporate. It rains a lot in Jerusalem. Then they float over the valley between Jerusalem and Jordan, which, as we know, is the lowest place on the planet Earth, where the Dead Sea is 400 meters below sea level. So the Judean hills break the clouds and they float over and create what we call a shadow desert. So that's where the desert itself is. The timeline, someone asked me. Well, there's 2 ways to get the timeline. I got this one years ago from the Tower of David Museum. But also next month I have a new book coming out called Jewish Journeys to be published by Koren. That has a timeline in as well. It's about Jewish history, specifically this period, the Second Temple period of the Maccabees and the Persians and the Romans. And that'll be coming out next month with its own timeline in. Okay, what else? Any other questions? I'm just looking at the chat over here. If you have any questions, now is the time to pop it into the chat section. And before we finish off by going through the actual fortress itself and seeing what we can find in the fortress. You have to buy a book to get the timeline. I don't know if you do. That's one way to do it. Otherwise, you could just look up Jerusalem timeline. That's what Google's all about. But you will notice that Were the Camels Wild? They're what's called semi-wild. In other words, they're like free-range chickens. They wander around wildly, but they are owned by Bedouin tribes who keep a loose eye on them. But they do wander around that part of the desert pretty freely, but they're not wild camels. They're actually quite valuable for the Bedouins. Bedouins, by the way, even for people who don't like my comedy, are never angry. Does anyone know why? Because they're nomads. Get it? Nomad. Anyway, so have the walls and floors been refurbished? No. They have literally been lying there since the massive earthquake of the 7th century. There's just no one goes up there to steal the stuff. Quite often there's a problem in Israel where things are taken for secondary or tertiary use. But because this fortress is so isolated, that is the mosaic floors, the way they were laid 2,000 years ago. It's not a tourist site. In other words, there's no entrance booth, there's no toilets, there's no infrastructure. And what you see is what you get, and which we're about to explore now in the fortress itself. As we wander through it, basically preserved or frozen in time, what's left, the way that it was built 2,000 years ago. So, without further ado, is this, one more question. So is this to the southwest of Qumran? It is to the northeast of Qumran. In other words, if you went back to the main road, you'd have to drive all the way down to the Dead Sea and then make a right to get to Qumran. It's so close to Jerusalem, it's even closer than Qumran is to Jerusalem. So it's the northeast of Qumran where we are right now. Again, the site is called Hyrcanus. All right, any more questions? All right, okay. And the reason I tell dad jokes is because I'm a dad. All right, let's go back to explore the fortress itself. We'll take some more questions at the end. Dima.
Tuvia, shall we carry on with the movie, or?
Amshich.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
You can keep on writing questions. We'll address them at the end. We're now going to explore this Hasmonean fortress and see what we can find.
Let's go and have a look. What do you need when you build a fortress? You need the 4 Ds. You need it to be a place that you can drive to, a place you can defend, a place where you can get food, a place where you can get drink. Dining, drink, defense, driving. Let's look over there. System number 1, brethren and sistren.
Brethren and sistren.
With a hydraulic plaster. Over here, we have what is probably a bathing pool with stairs going down to it, covered over by these blocks. And let's see what's down here, folks. Inside the system is a column base and a column drum. Now this is how Herod built in the desert. We have the same features on Masada and in Herodian, where Josephus mentioned there were long marble columns, but the reality was they were optical illusions. They were built drums, one on top of the other. Once they were completed and stacked on top of each other, they were covered with plaster made to look like one long column. In the corner, where the corners met, 2 columns were carved one next to the other, so the cross section looked like a heart. And there's one right over here. This is a corner column from 2,000 years ago from the Herodian palace on top, which would have ended in a heart shape over here, just lying here in the middle of the desert.
Absolutely magnificent. My vision is to get this as a base of a table, a beautiful glass top, and this underneath, coffee table, lovely cup of coffee. Actually, at this stage, I'd like an ice cold.
Cup of ice beer.
Oh, ice cold beer coming up.
L'chaim.
L'chaim. Never remove anything from an antiquity site.
Perish the thought. Who would ever do that? And what have the Romans ever done for us? Well, they did build aqueducts, as we saw. They built roads. And also, look at this technology. This arch has stood the test of time for 2,000 years. Aren't you glad I told you that? And inside is a 4th massive water system. Huge. This water system alone could hold thousands of cubic liters. And the arch has stood intact the test of time. 2,000 years with hydraulic plaster still attached to the walls. They certainly don't make them like this anymore. Hello, Herod!
He didn't answer back.
That's because he's dead.
And we'll finish off with a view. Have a look at this.
Ah!
Yeah, we're in the Holy Land. this hole. Woo! Stunning. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, hope you enjoyed that little exploring on top of Hyrcanus. Let's talk a little bit about Herod. Let's finish off with getting a little feel of who he was as a man and what was he doing with all these desert fortresses that we're going to be exploring with you. We've done Masada, off the beaten track. We've now touched on Hyrcania. Next up, Kypros, Sartaba, Herodian. Plenty more to come, but a little bit about Herod.
Herod was a walking contradiction. On the one hand, he was one of the greatest engineers of the Roman world. On the other hand, he was crazy with a capital C, loco, mad, loony, but an incredible building. And this is just one of many fortresses he built all the way along the eastern border of the Roman Empire. With Parthia, he built a whole line of defensive fortresses, the most famous being Masada, and all with the exception of one on the western shore of the Dead Sea. The one he built on the eastern shore was called Machareus, which is in today's Jordan. And nothing was impossible to him. No, it can't be done was not in his language. And that is why we have this fortress here with no natural water except the flash floods, and yet he found a way through incredible engineering to provide it with year-round water, as he did all his desert fortresses. And we saw some of those systems up there.
But rumor has it, with all its beauty here and the water and the life, it became a place of death.
Right, because Herod was a megalomaniac. He was also a maniac, and he thought that everybody was out to get him. So what he did is he replaced a very popular Hasmoneans who were Jewish kings, and even though they'd also been slightly tyrannical, people's memory got a bit hazy and people looked back on the good old days. And Herod, in order to cement his popularity with the people, married a Hasmonean princess. But then he was concerned about the family, so he invited them all to his wedding, and now people might understand being a mother-in-law, but everybody, the only person he let alive was his wife Miriam's brother, with a very Jewish name of Aristobulus, and he made him the high priest. And he was such a good-looking guy that people saw him and said, "Wow, it's a shame we don't have any Hasmoneans ruling us anymore." That evening, he invited his brother-in-law to a swim in the palace pool, very near here in Jericho. And even though he was a very good swimmer, he died in a mysterious drowning accident as two of Herod's bodyguards pulled him under the water. And that was the course of his life. He murdered those nearest and dearest to him. He had two sons, Alexander and Aristobulus.
Ah, yes!
And for their 18th birthday present, after the most expensive education money could buy, they both got the same present, death by strangulation.
Rumor has it, Hyrcania was the place where he got rid of Herod's country.
Right, the last remaining son, Herod Antipater, thought he was going to get the kingdom, talked a bit too soon about picking up on his old man. And Herod, who was on his deathbed, ordered his son to go as well. And that's the place of his life. Finally, Herod's beloved wife, Miriam, she wasn't his BFF after he strangled her children. He killed her as well.
In love.
He was in love. He couldn't believe what he done. He decided to word for the next preserve the body in honey. I think you could tell me boring. And he carried on doing the deed. He got himself into a very sick disease. That is why to this day Americans call their wives. He was a sick puppy, but an incredible engineer. All rolled up.
Well, it's getting a little hot out. I don't know if you can hear it. Whoops! The vultures are circling and the ravens are circling. I think they see us.
כמעט, יכול להפסיק מתי שאתה רוצה. Hey, so I heard some people that there was issues with the sound quality, which again, it's not really full of. But you will be happy to hear that we pre-recorded this. As I mentioned in the chat, if anyone's following it, you can go to YouTube to a channel called The Running Tour Guide by Fred Schmoyle's channel, and you can see the film on your own computers with much better sound quality. And that, of course, is called Hyrcanus and the Desert Fortress and some of the other films. You can also go to my YouTube site, Tuvia Book, and you can see a short version of the same film as well. So basically, I'm looking at the questions we've got. Some people ask questions about how these places were built. And if any of you have seen the Mel Brooks film, It's Good to Be the King, they were built with lots of slaves. And the material was all very local. And as people ask about dry construction, it was dry, of course, because the desert, but everything's got cement and everything is put into place. This is Roman technology with keystones and whatnot. And the only places in Israel you find dry construction, that is massive stones without any cement or mortar, are monumental buildings, such as the Western Wall has no cement, the Cave of Machpelah in Hebron, and another huge fortress built by the Maccabees in the Jordan Valley called Alexandrium. Also, the stones are so big that the weight supports themselves. But when you use lots of small stones, like the ones you saw in this fortress, they are all put together with bricks and mortar. All right, any other questions? You can ask through your chat session here. So basically, just to go again with the chronological period, the fortress we saw was built by the Maccabees and refortified by Herod, then basically abandoned for many centuries. It was a small Byzantine monastery established in the 4th or 5th century, but then deserted by the Byzantines and destroyed in an earthquake. Someone in the 7th century, someone asked how this compares to the Nabateans. So the Nabateans were around at this period as well. Herod's mother actually was a Nabatean princess, and they were on the other side of the Jordan. So their cities, there's a few of them in Israel as well. One of them is called Shifta, one of them is called Uvdat. They're the two. One's called Mamshit. They're the 3 Nabatean cities in Israel. Their main necropolis or city of the dead is the famous Petra that was carved into red sandstone. But they had also cities from Petra going all the way to the port in Gaza on the Mediterranean, so they could get the spices across the desert. But it is more or less the same time as this time as well. The Nabateans were around until the Romans forcibly converted them around the 1st or 2nd century of the Common Era.
Tuvia, it looks like you're frozen. Tuvia, are you still with us? Ladies and gentlemen, it looks like Tuvia disconnected or something like this. Let's wait once. I'm really sorry for the technical issue. Just would like to share some general information about our lectures. To whom of you who is joining us first time, if you missed us previous lecture for some reason, you didn't know about it and just missed them, you can watch all of our lectures on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/WZOUK. All our lectures are there. Usually we uploading the videos.
Can't hear you, bro.
Sorry?
Can't hear you.
Oh, now, is it better now? Sorry about this. Yeah, is it okay?
The rest of us can hear you, I think.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Thank you very much. Yes. Again, all our lectures you can find on our YouTube channel, and all our events you can find on our YouTube channel and the Facebook page as well, facebook.com/WZOUK, where you're welcome to watch them anytime. To whom of you who don't have a Facebook, you can do it as well without any problem. I see Tuvia is not coming back to us for some reason, probably some technical issues. Let's give him 5 more minutes if you wish to stay.
Bye-bye.
If you have any other questions which I can answer, you're welcome to put them on chat or ask them in person. Next month, we will host Tuvia as well with another journey. Unfortunately, under the circumstances, Israel is still closed to the tourists. But this is the option what we have to enjoy the tours online. Let's hope it will be open on 1st of August. Yes, Tuvia
Chat's not working at the moment.
Sorry?
Chat is not working. Chat is not working at the moment.
Yeah, why? It looks like, yes, it looks like it works. Fascinating.
Froze them.
YouTube URL, yes, it's youtube.com/WZOUK. I will put it here as well to the chat. Okay, all our lectures you can find here as well. Yes, Tuvia is not coming back. Let's see, maybe something on WhatsApp. No, I think it's something with his connection because he is not answering on WhatsApp as well. My sincere apologies, ladies and gentlemen. And I think I will need to tell you, thank you very much for joining us. Okay, stay tuned for our next lectures.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Have a great evening.
Thank you very much.
Stay safe. And I hope
Thank you very much. From Johannesburg.
Oh, amazing. Thank you very much. From Johannesburg.
Thank you very much. Been great. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Also, it's been lovely having the experience visit. Thank you.
Very interesting and enjoyable. Thank you so much.
Enjoy Sunday.
Thank you, David Shine and Irene from Golders Green.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shalom. Toda Rabba.
The next one.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Shabbat
Have a
shalom.
good one. Shabbat Shalom.